My name is Kendall Brinson. I am one of the professional learning and outreach managers with the Museum of Science with the Youth Engineering Solutions team. And I want to thank you all for registering and being here tonight, of course, as the school year kicks off for many of you, or you've already begun in some cases. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty. All right. So to get started, we're going to review just a quick agenda here. All right, so I'm going to do a quick overview of our goals and an overview of Youth Engineering Solutions as a whole, in case anybody is new here and hasn't seen us or any of our products before. Then we're going to dive in and do an engineering challenge together from one of our YES units. Then we'll take a look at some of those what is engineering lessons from other units across grade bands, since I assume many of you teach different grade levels, maybe STEM coaches, you may be teaching elementary, early elementary, middle school. So I want to cover our grounds and make sure you see a little bit of everything. Then we're going to talk about how that connects to everything else and make sure we have some time to answer some questions, discuss classroom application, all sorts of resources that we have available for you. And then, of course, there'll be some time for Q&A at the end, and I'll stick around for a few extra minutes if we boil over a little bit. So no sweat. I'm not going to hold you any longer than 8 p.m. All right. So really what I want everyone to get out of this is that first you get to experience something hands-on with me, what engineering feels like for students, understanding how this lesson one, what is engineering, introduces the engineering design process in your classrooms, and explore how these activities really build confidence, creativity, and collaboration in your classroom, and then how this really is even useful to you in launching meaningful STEM learning in your classrooms as you go through the school year. Admitting more people into our Zoom. All right. So what is YES? So if you're new here and you hadn't had a chance to explore our website at all, Youth Engineering Solutions is a new engineering curricula for K through 8 learners. It formally launched in February of last year. So we've got a little bit of time under our belts, but it was developed after our engineering is elementary, which is our former name, and all our units are being written into this format. However, what you really need to know is that we use hands-on and real-world focused units that center around meaningful and socially engaged engineering challenges that connect to students' real lives and communities. It's designed for pre-K all the way up to grade 8, and they are grade banded for different needs, and they're developmentally appropriate for each age level, whether it's scaffolding for science concepts or even the materials that they use. And they are really designed to be built for all learners, and they're built on research-based principles like universal design, including asset-based pedagogies and collaboration and supporting diverse role models. And of course, there's a focus on the engineering design process. So every single unit begins with this what is engineering lesson that we'll explore today to introduce the engineering design process in a relatable way. Of course, we also test in classrooms, and we align to standards across the country, and we are developed in partnerships with a lot of educators, and we pilot test in real classrooms to make sure that they make sense. And we have flexible implementation. So if you are only using it during the school day, or if you're doing it after school, or you only have 30 minutes a day, there are ways to make our curriculum work. We want our learning to be multimodal, so there's all different ways for students to engage. There's stories, visuals, discussions, hands-on activities to reach everyone. And of course, we are also free and accessible. So everything you see today is available online for free. We'll talk a little bit about the website later, but it's just yes.mos.org, and includes all of the print, the teacher guides, etc., so that any teacher can pick up our units and go from there. All right. Enough chatting. Now that we've gone over a little bit of our goals for today and taking a look at YES as in general, we're going to actually engage with this actual unit lesson, what is engineering? And this is particularly from our upper elementary units, just like a student would on their first day. And it's a simple challenge, but I want you to really get into the mindset of what your students might be experiencing if they were to do this in your classroom. So you'll have a few minutes to do all of the things. If you don't have your materials, I even have mine. I'm going to do it with you as well. You can still take a second. Those are in the chat. But as you work, I want you to think about what problem are you solving? What are your criteria and constraints? And how might your students respond to the same challenge? Make sense? Take thumbs up if you're cool. All right. So first and foremost, as engineers, we have to think about the type of problem that we're solving. So I have this photo here, and there's some things going on. You can either raise your hand or type in the chat, what is the problem? What do you notice in this image? There is no place to sit. Why might these people want to sit down? Yeah, we have an injury. We have someone on crutches. So this person might want to sit. There is a pregnant person on the side here too. They probably don't want to be standing for too long. Yep, we've got an older person as well, probably gets a little tired. I have no idea what this man is carrying. I've been guessing it's a tuba for a while. He probably wants to put that down as well. Right, so we're noticing a problem and we've got this issue. There's no place to sit. They're at a bus stop. There's lots of different accessibility issues with them not being able to sit down. So we're going to try and solve this problem together. And what we're going to do is design a model bench. But before you get started, we have to think a little bit more like engineers. I'm just telling you have to make a model bench. What else do you need to know about this problem before you get started? Yeah, how big the bench has to be, how long. So we're thinking about our size, our length, the weight load. How much weight does this bench have to support? How big it is, the space where it's held, what materials you need, right? So if you're sticking it inside this specific place, we might need to figure out if it can fit there. How much money do we have? The city's broke, I'm sorry to tell you, but it also has to be durable, maybe. Height for multiple needs, like not just the length, but how high the seat might need to be. How tall for comfortable seating, right? Does it need a back? Does it need to be comfortable for sitting for a long time? Awesome. So I'm going to answer some of these questions for you, not all of them, but some of these will make for a better bench design as you try to think about what your model bench needs to do. So I'm going to tell you. So first and foremost, your bench needs to be 3 to 4 inches tall. So that's just from your desk or your table or wherever you're sitting. So to the seat. So if you add a back to your bench, it can be taller than that, but to your seat needs to be 3 to 4 inches. Your bench also has to be 12 inches wide. So you might have to think a little bit about that because if you've grabbed copy paper, you might have to take some new measurements. You'll also need to support at least one person's weight for 10 seconds. Your model person can be a pen or a pencil, or if you have something fun on your desk, like I have this little Bigfoot that I'm going to use for mine, but you can really use anything that's sort of lighter weight in this sort of weight range. And then you'll have 5 sheets of copy paper, and you'll have 6 inches of tape. It's not very much, but you can measure it off with your ruler. And then, of course, you can use scissors and rulers to help you make your design, but they cannot become part of your bench. So you can't use your ruler as the seat. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions before we get started and I give you some time to make your bench? All right, so the last thing you need to know is that you have 10 minutes to design your model bench. You can use this time however you'd like, if you'd like to draw your plan first or whatever it may be, but I'll give you 10 minutes and I'm going to be designing alongside you. And if you're ready, if you have any questions while you're going, feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute. But I'm going to go ahead and start our timer. All right, that is time. I see a lot of hands down. I see some people still working. It is totally okay if you're not done. We sort of shorten the time a little bit to give you the sense of stress that your students might be under when you give them this activity. So we're going to take a second. And if you would like to, I would love to have one or two volunteers. Just show everyone your bench. What did you come up with in your design? You could explain why. I'll tell you a little bit about mine. My little friend is is on his bench here. And I actually made little columns underneath, and I have two sheets of paper sort of folded into each other to get to 12 inches. I actually started with the back, but it was a little too heavy. So the other question I would like to ask you all is just to put in the chat 2 or 3 things that you did during this process, all the way from when I showed you the photo up until building and sharing your design. Just to tell me, what did you do that made you feel like an engineer, if anything? Anything at all. Doesn't have to be complicated. Reviewing the criteria multiple times, going back to it, making sure you're meeting it. Iterating, trying to make changes as you go, problem solving. Yeah, making a sketch. Absolutely. I started to sketch mine out and then I had to cross it out because it wasn't working. Sketched, you measured things to make sure you met the criteria. You're testing to make sure you can modify. Trial and error, absolutely. Testing to make sure it actually holds up your model person. So one of the questions in the chat before we move on was how to test your bench so that you can make sure it supports at least one person. So any model that you use, like I have a little Bigfoot, you could use blocks in your classroom, pens or pencils or anything like that. You would just place it on the bench and time it for 10 seconds to make sure that it was supporting that weight. But more and more thoughts are coming in. You measured multiple times how you could best use your resources. You didn't have much. That 6 inches of tape really got me a little bit. Absolutely. So all of these things are really important as we think about how this unit actually supports students as they go through into their next phases. Of course, you needed more tape and more time. Your students will probably say the same thing. They would give you some time to improve as well. So this was sort of a rapid iteration moment here for us. So with that said, and what's really exciting is that all of you use the engineering design process, even if you didn't know the words or the steps at the time, right? You were asking questions to yourselves like, how am I going to make this work? Can I make it strong enough to support these people? You're imagining different solutions. Even between the 3 designs that were shared, they were all different. Some of you made a physical plan, you wrote things out. Some of you might have thought about it. You created and tested it. And some of you even improved designs as you went when it didn't go as expected. So this is just to show us that this process is natural and it's how people really solve problems every day. And the language on this chart really is just gives us a shared way to describe what you already did. And for us, this is really important because students would go through the same process as well, thinking about how they have done, how they feel like engineers through this process. And with that said, here's where it gets even better. These are all the practices that we developed in a list that engineers use all the time. And they're the same ones we want students to practice in our yes units. And things like working in teams, of course, you work solo today, but balancing criteria and constraints, making evidence-based decisions, and even communicating your design ideas with other people. And if we think about what we just shared, all of the things you just did sort of fit squarely into these practices somewhere. And I bet you can see some of those practices in your own reflections. So everything from maybe you applied science knowledge to a problem. Like I was thinking about columns and the strength of triangles as I was going through this. I'm sure some of you also thought the same. Constructing a model and using a prototype to sort of test the design that might be built later. So all of these really feed into supporting students and believing in themselves, understanding that they do engineering already, and so do you. And so this is really part of our introduction to our what is engineering activity in all of our units. So with that said, I want to do a quick walkthrough of some of our other activities so you can see the other options you have to use in your classroom, but also how this sort of grows across grade bands and that these are featured in different yes product lines. They all use affordable materials, and so you can really pick these up at any point in your time in your classroom this year. So in our early elementary, so kindergarten to 2nd grade, these are from our enrichment units. And our enrichment units are really designed for out of school time or supplementary in your classroom. So in this first one here, it is designed to design a supply case. And the goal here is very simple, but it's meaningful. It needs to hold 5 crayons and stay together when it's dropped from a table. They have very simple materials, tape, scissors, and some craft foam or paper. But the way they're introduced to the problem is a little bit different. So we looked at a picture and asked a bunch of questions about it. On this slide here, you can see an image, and this is from sort of a drawing, a story that is told about a little girl who has a very messy backpack and she needs some help designing something to keep all of her materials organized in there. So a relatable problem, a little bit of a simpler challenge, as you can see. Then in upper elementary for enrichments, they are still designing a supply case, but this time there's a little more criteria, and instead they are introduced to the problem through a comic. So our friend is calling the engineering help desk, talking about his messy backpack. He needs something that can hold all his supplies, and they talk a little bit about the engineering design process. And instead, you can see there starts to be some added measurements, like it needs to fit 5 pencils, it needs to stay together when dropped from 4 feet, and again, the materials are still very simple, some paper or craft foam and some tape and scissors. So you can pick this up at any time. And then for middle school enrichment, it gets a little bit more advanced. They're designing a water tower to be at least a foot tall and not including the water container, and it has to hold a container of water for 10 seconds. So a little bit more challenging to do. They only have 20 minutes to engineer, and they have very few materials, 100 index cards, masking tape, a ruler, and some scissors. Now, as you can see, it's asking students a little bit more to think about structure and stability and systems, all while practicing sort of some rapid iteration and introducing them to the engineering design process. So moving into our in-school units, you just saw the bench activity from our upper elementary. So there's also an early elementary version of this as well, where they're introduced to the problem by looking at this picture too. But you'll notice some of the materials and criteria change. So for one, you'll see the swap out from paper to index cards. They're a little bit sturdier, easier to work with. They still have 6 inches of tape, but they no longer have to measure their bench. It just needs to support one person for 10 seconds. And then they get some bonus points if they can support more than one person. So some of this is sort of scaffolded, so it makes more sense for a younger learner who might not have the skills yet to measure their bench, but could probably do the rest of the activity. Now, this is the one you know, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. So of course, you've seen this one, and this is what we've worked through together. And so I want to jump into our middle school activity, which you'll see at the beginning of our middle school units, where they're introduced to this problem of text neck, where your head and neck may start hurting the longer you look at your phone. Very relatable to our middle school kids, and probably even earlier. So they have to design a cell phone stand with basically any materials. There is a suggested list, but you can use literally anything. Sometimes we just use cardboard, paper clips, and some tape. And it has to prop up a phone at different angles, and they only get 15 minutes. So they get even less time. Their materials are a little more, whatever you've got, you can use for this cell phone stand activity. But it is a problem-solving activity that feels sort of directly relevant to their lives, and I'm sure they've all experienced this before. So you have a lot of options. You could use all of them in your classroom, and they all exist as lesson 1. So you can pull them in whatever capacity makes sense for you. So as we've talked about a little bit, as we finished off our bench activity, across all grade levels, you can see how these activities are scaling. The problems get a little bit more complex, and the solutions get a little more sophisticated, but we're hoping that students are naturally doing this engineering process, and that's why lesson 1 is so important and why you can use it to jumpstart your year. So it's not lecturing, and it gets you a bit of a sense of how your students interact with one another if you do it at the beginning of the year. So I want to just take a moment to zoom out to think about how this connects to the engineering design process, because we talked about it a little bit already. So it's intentionally designed to immerse students in the problem, right away before they even learn the names of the engineering design process phases. Through simple real-world challenges, they naturally start asking questions, imagining ideas, just like engineers and just like you did today. So after completing the activity, the yes lesson, so this is not unique to what we did today, also prompts students to reflect on what they did, to think about how they've been engineers and compare it to the visual of the engineering design process. So this helps students really realize that they were already using it, and it gives them confidence to move forward. So even in just 30 minutes of time, students can be introduced to the fact that they have these habits of engineers, they have this mindset already, and it can set the tone for the rest of the unit or even the school year, and using this problem-solving process even in other settings. So with that said, I want to give us a couple of minutes to chat a little bit about how you might use these activities with your students. And if there's any adaptation or extension you might want to make. This is a great large group of people here that have tons of expertise. So I would love if anybody has some thoughts or ideas that they'd like to share. Absolutely. So you're starting to talk about, Lisa just posted in the chat as well, making those cross-curricular connections. So talking about the measurements that we use in science, like maybe we want to talk about the metric system, or maybe we want to talk about the physics of a bench, whatever works for your group to start extending. Giving them a reading would give them some more literacy if you wanted to pull that in about what engineers do. There's lots of connections you can make. That sounds great. Anything else we want to talk about in terms of extensions or how you might use these activities with your kiddos? Beth says she's going to use this as a first day activity. That's really exciting. I also like this as a first day activity. Great way to create the flavor of your class, set the tone of what your classroom is going to be like. It also gives you a sense of what the group dynamics are for your kids as you start, where they're at sort of with their confidence in the room and things like that. That's a really great way to sort of set the tone and get a feel for where everyone is at. And Caitlin, these do work for team building activities or social skills because we recommend that all of these are done in groups. All of our units are designed to be group work, and it's very rare that these kids work on their own. For older kids, absolutely, for middle school or even upper elementary, you might want to ask them to have them write or share their design. The suggested group size, Maisha, is 3 for our elementary units. And for our early ed, we do pairs, and then middle school, you can go 3 to 4. Whatever works for your group and where your students are at sort of with group work, because obviously the larger the group size, the harder it is to sort of manage differing ideas across, across the board. All right. Thank you for sharing. During the first couple of weeks, oh yes, so Penny also says that she would use it during the first couple of weeks, establishing norms and expectations aligned with NGSS and some other standards. All of our curricula is designed with NGSS standards as an alignment, so you're welcome to use it in that way as well. All right, so I'm going to keep us pushing. So it does work great as a standalone, and we want you to use it because it's so powerful for all sorts of reasons, whether it's working through what your classroom will be like, introducing science concepts or engineering, but it also works with the rest of the unit as well. So if you are looking for your next steps, I'm going to show you where you can find everything online and what you will find when you get there. So we believe, of course, that the whole unit works really well together. So this sets them up for success as they go on to do an entire yes unit, whether it's, and you work through those individual design phases through each lesson to set them up for success for later. So of course, it's building that confidence, the skills, the interests to come back and fulfill the entire unit later. That is up to you when you do it. You can do it immediately after, or you could save it for way late in the school year so that you can fill some other gaps as you're going through your curricula for the year. So with that said, to make it easier for all of you, all of our print materials are available for free online, and that includes the entire teacher guide. So you'll have step-by-step support for teaching every single lesson for all of our units. You'll also find student-facing engineering notebooks, which are worksheet pages that document all students' thinking. They can draw their ideas, write, and answer questions. There's also student-facing slides that have discussion prompts, images, instructions, all the things that you really need. Basically, if you need it, whether it's planning or teaching, it's there to download. So I'm going to drop our website in the chat. So you have that to dig around in later on. And with that said, this is what you'll find if you head onto our website. If you click on whichever unit or grade level you're looking for, so for example, we did in-school units today, you could click on any grade level and take a look. And on the right there, it'll say download unit, and it'll take you in to a Google Drive where you can copy everything over, make edits, move things around, read all of the curricula that's available to you. So whether you're just curious about trying the one activity I showed you today or one of the options, those are all embedded in there. Or if you're looking for the next step and iteration of that, there's more to be seen and more to be done. So it's up to you where you stand with that, of course. And I will take you online in a second. But as you're thinking a little bit ahead, if you are super interested in learning how to get started with the full Yes unit, we actually have another webinar to support you coming up next. So we hope that you're able to utilize these. But we also know that moving from one short activity that's really easy, it's easy to pick up, the resources exist for you, and moving into an entire unit can be a little daunting. So if you're looking to answer questions like, where do you start? How do I plan? What materials do I need? How do I select the best unit for my students? This is exactly what our next webinar is about. So if you're thinking about using any of the activities from today or thinking about taking the next step into leap into a full unit, I will bring this back up in a little bit. But I want to just take you online so that you know exactly where to find things. But in the meantime, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can shift over to the website. But if you are having any thoughts or questions about our curricula at this point, I am here to support in the questions before I share my screen to show you what's online for you to help support you in doing any of these units in even the first bit here. All right, so I'm going to take you online with me for a moment. So once you're on our website, there's lots of the resources here for you to access. Some of them are brand new, and I'm so excited that they're here for you to take a look at. But first, I want to just take you into our curricula to where you can find these lesson 1 activities. So if I go to Yes Elementary, for example, and I want to take a look at the activity we did today, if I click directly on a unit and click download unit, it will take you to this free portal. It fills in all my info. You can agree to sign up for our newsletter if you would like. And then you'll continue to download, and it will take you straight to a Google Drive folder, like I mentioned, with all of the resources. So if you're looking for the step-by-step guide of how to do a lesson 1, very simply in the teacher guide, if you go down to our What is Engineering, it'll pop you right down. It'll tell you the instructions, how long it will take you to do the whole thing. This first page is really helpful, and it gives you some objectives, the materials that you will need, very simple, as well as a step-by-step. If you want to ask questions, there are sample questions in here with sample responses, as well as sort of guiding you directly through the entire process of making the bench with your kiddos and how they will sort of interact with the activity. So with that said, there are also the slides, for example, that I used today in support are also here in the slide deck. So you can pull these out on their own and edit them to make them make sense for you. What we didn't do today was introduce vocabulary, but there are vocabulary cards as well. So as you can see, pretty much verbatim, here's what we were working off of. And then here are the worksheets that students would be working off of as well. So there are also sentence frames in these slides to help support working together for students. So all of the resources are here for you to pick up that lesson 1 and do it on your own whenever you would like and are ready to get started. Any questions about that? This This particular lesson one that we did today, the bench activity, is from the upper elementary. So you would see it in grades 3, 4, and 5. And then for our lower elementary, in school, you're going to see the bench, but modified without measurements in grades kindergarten, first and second. All right. So also some other things that might be of use to you as you get started. Under our professional learning tab, there are quite a few things for you to take a look at. So first and foremost, you found our webinar and we have more. So if you're ever curious about some of our webinars and other workshops, they're all listed here on our website, and you can register for free for any of them. And then some of the other things to look at are the learning library. I think this is our soft launch here for you. So if you're looking for other webinar topics, all of them are recorded here, and you're able to watch any of them anytime, asynchronously. This one will also be uploaded. Don't worry, your faces won't be in there. So you can take a look at all of these as well if you're looking for some additional support. Then if you're looking for videos of kiddos doing things or how this actually plays out in the classroom, so say you're taking a look at how students make evidence-based decisions. There's a few videos of students doing a unit in class, and some reflection questions to help you think about how this is actually going to work in your classroom as well. So this learning library is very, very helpful for you to start to think about how you can make this work in your class and how it might look in your classroom as well. So there is lots and lots of videos here to help support you thinking about your classroom and how it might fit. All right. Are there any other questions or thoughts about our website before I keep kicking us on? Because I have one last thing just to make sure that everyone is able to contact us freely and knows where to find everything. Any questions at this point? So Regina is asking if there's a list of supplies. Yes, on our website. On our website, when you're looking into each unit, there are materials lists. So for all of our What is Engineering activities, they're not pulled out separately at this point, but they could be. But they are embedded in each unit. So if you're taking a look, but our What is Engineering activities are generally very, very straightforward for materials, and you can change the materials if it doesn't work for you. So for example, our cell phone stands for middle school, we typically use a suggested list, but you can use whatever you have. The only requirement for that one is 6 paper clips because it says it on the slide, but you're welcome to change that as well. So there's no ties to holding exactly to what the curriculum says either. So someone is asking also about rubrics and assessments. So the rubrics and assessments, they exist for our engineering as elementary units. However, for yes units, we have a sort of a different approach because a lot of what you're going to see in engineering is more observational. Are my students thinking and trying and working through these problems together? So what we actually are recommending is that you collect their engineering design notebooks so you can see some of that thought process. And then that list of engineering practices, you can also use as a sort of checklist to sort of see how your students are growing from beginning to end. A lot of units have them reflect at the beginning of how they've been an engineer and at the end, again, of how they've developed and grown as an engineer. So you can see some of that progress as well. All right, another question, differentiation in units. So for yes units, the differentiation is sort of built in, where all of the worksheets are designed to be accessible for all types of learners, including multilingual learners. If you're looking for some information on what that actually looks like, in our previous webinars, there are a few webinars on our scaffolds and what is built in and the affordances with multilingual learners. So you're welcome to use some of those. Our units are also available in Spanish in our student-facing materials. So if you need a translation, they exist in Spanish. All right, another question is if there's any special education lessons. So what I will suggest There we have a former webinar, and we have a partner who has worked specifically with students with severe disabilities with advanced needs, and she has adapted a ton of our resources. I actually want you to reach out to me and I can connect you with her if you're really curious about how that works, because she's adapted and used them with her special education students. Okay, so someone's asking about pre-K, and we do have a pre-K set of activities, and it's called We Engineer. So when you're digging around the website, you can take a look at those. And those activities, there's 4 of them. They can be done in any order, and they're set up to be shorter activities. They can be done in pairs or as group activities, like at a circle time. And we have some webinars on early education pre-K as well. So if you want to take a look at those, but dig around for our We Engineer. Someone asked, how long does it take to work through a unit? Depends on the unit you're looking at. So if you're looking at an in-school yes unit, those are between 8 and 9 lessons a piece. They take approximately 45 to 60 minutes per lesson. However, you have options to cut back or add wherever it makes sense for you. Again, like I said, there's no need to keep the unit verbatim as it stands if that doesn't work for your class time. These are suggestions that we've built in a lot of scaffolds for. So for example, in our medicine coolers unit for middle school, they're designing a medicine cooler that can keep medicine cold by investigating insulation materials. And so one of the activities is a chemical reaction to make a cold pack. So if your students have had no experience with the chemical reaction before, or it's just going to be too messy because you don't have a sink in your classroom or something, it works to cut that particular lesson out and you can shift some things around. And they can still focus on the insulation part of the activity. So there's workarounds to make them shorter, but if you need some extra support in figuring out where to cut down, how it can fit within your other curricula that you're trying to teach and standards that you're trying to teach, absolutely reach out to us. That's what we're here for. So, but if you are looking for something a little bit shorter, you can take a look at any of our enrichment units. Those are designed to be 5 activities. They're approximately 45 to 60 minutes per activity. But there are 5 extension activities as well. So if you're looking and you say, actually, I have more time, there's some extra things for you to do as well. So for example, our rescue shuttles enrichment unit, if you chose that one, they're making stomp rockets, but with purpose to rescue people in a water rescue situation, so their rockets have to go specific distances to reach them. And then some of those extension lessons are thinking about other aeronautical engineering things that an engineer might make, like designing paper airplanes and things like that. As well as like a waterproof bag activity, because you're thinking water rescue, how do I keep my rocket from being destroyed when I actually rescue the person? So there's some extensions as well if you're looking at those enrichment ones. All right. So if you're looking for a link to a specific activity, I'm happy to help you after this or tomorrow if you would like. All of the lesson ones, the what is engineering, the bench activity that we did today, feel free. They are embedded in the other units, but you can pull them out and make them work for you. So if you're looking for benches, you can take a look at magnetic dog doors or plastic filters, and you can pull that set of slides and those instructions from the teacher guide for those particular ones. But this will be shared after. So if you're thinking, I don't remember which grade level or whatever it may be, you'll get this in a few days published online, and you'll get to see the whole works again. So no worries if you can't find something. I'll drop my email in the chat again for us to, if you need it. So you can contact me directly if you need some extra support. All right, and last thing before everybody leaves, if you have more questions, I'll hang out for a few more minutes. Share my screen one more time so that you also have our general emails just in case you, for some reason, don't have a second to get back to us. we don't want this to be the last time you connect with us. If you need anything, if you have questions about kits, professional development, professional learning, you're trying to buy kits from us, you're trying to build a kit on your own, feel free to email us at any of these emails on the screen here. And then if you're looking for updates about new kits, new webinars, all the things, you can also sign up for our newsletter. So you're welcome. Lisa has put the link in the chat directly to our Google Drive here. The average cost per kit, a good question. It varies quite a bit. Our middle school kits are generally a little bit more expensive because they have more, advanced materials, if you will. But our elementary units are average around $200 to $300, but our middle school ones are a little bit higher than that. Any other questions? Make sure we get to everything. Oh my goodness, how many kits for elementary? So our yes units right now are 1 unit per grade level. Middle school has 3 published units currently. They're currently writing more units. However, our engineering is elementary. Units are also published and free online. If you're familiar with engineering is elementary, that used to be behind a paywall. It no longer is. So if you're looking for those activities, those are also there. So there are lots and lots of units to choose from. Just be aware that the engineering is elementary units are structured a little bit differently, but they exist online and you can use those as well. And we also sell kits to support many of those EIE units too. But you are also welcome to source materials for kits on your own. You do not have to buy them. And like Lisa said, how many students per kit? 24 to 30 students. So if you buy or make 1 kit, it is basically for a singular classroom. So if you teach multiple sections, you may have to replace some materials. So with that said, do the kits mainly consist of consumable items? No. So fortunately, lots of materials can be reused and recycled from year to year. There are some units that are better about that than others, of course. For example, if your students are taking the design home, you end up without the things to reuse. But there is a list at the beginning of every single unit for materials that are both, it lists them out separately between consumables and non-consumables, what can be used year to year, class to class, and what needs to be replaced. Most of the time, the replacements are pretty cheap, like construction paper, because they used it all in the unit, for example. So there's some options there. And there are tips and tricks for reusing things throughout lessons and for classes as well, sort of embedded in teacher tips of collect this at the end. So there's some extra supports. But if you need some more support, you know where to find us. All right, it is 8:01, so you do not have to stay any longer. And I would like to thank you all for being here, participating, chatting with me. And if you need anything at all, you know where to find us. And again, feel free to join us at our next webinar on September 16th if you're looking for your next steps of how do I choose a unit? Absolutely. All right. Have a good night, everyone. I'll hang out for a few more minutes if you need anything in the meantime. You're welcome, everyone.